So a lot of what we're going to be doing today is focusing on what coaching is, and then I'm going to teach you, and you're going to be able to practice some very specific coaching skills. And we're also going to be, in practicing those coaching skills, I don't do role plays, I don't do what ifs, but rather what's really going on in real life. So we take real situations that you're involved in or anticipate being involved in. In this situation, it might be about what you are anticipating once you meet the school leaders that you're going to be working with, what might be some of the challenges, what assumptions you're already making. And so I want to emphasize that we do work on really
Good morning, excuse our tardiness.
That's okay. I'm just glad that we have the time today to have a program, quite frankly. So I wanted to point out a couple things. I've written 2 books about coaching that are published by Quarterly Press, and I'm going to be giving these out during the day as little prizes. I am a credentialed coach by the International Coach Federation. And one of the reasons I have got into coaching is because I see that school leaders, in particular, are really most often on their own. It's not necessarily either appropriate or safe to share information with, or concerns with, certainly with your own staff. If you go to somebody higher up in the chain in your districts, then it could be evaluative. And so a lot of times, I know as a principal, I never had an assistant principal, and it was just me. And I was very fortunate. In the next room here is Nancy Richmond. She was a principal in another building in the district. And we used to have secret meetings, not just Nancy and I, but a couple other principals. We'd have secret meetings where we could just have our own agenda and discuss our own thing and be a support group to each other. And that's rare. So you are going to be a real support to the people with whom you're working. And so that's why coaching is going to be so critical in the process. I find, I named this the power of coaching conversations to support school leaders. You have all these slides in your packet, and there's also a set of handouts in your packet. I also left on the table my cards, my business cards. Please feel free to call or email me at any time if you have questions, or once you get into your working with your individual school leaders that you're assigned, and you come up with maybe there's a challenge, you're not quite sure how to approach a conversation with that person, feel free to call me. That's perfectly fine. I want to, first of all, emphasize that it's because we're going to be talking about coaching, and coaching is something that comes from your own internal brilliance, and I mean that sincerely. We have some norms. One, I'm going to ask you to listen fully and reflectively. Think about what people are saying in the room. I'm going to push you to practice new habits of mind. Practicing something new is difficult, and even at our age is still doable. You can teach an old dog new tricks. Okay? And I'm older than many. The third norm is the most important for our purposes today, and that's to hold any experiences or revelations anyone makes in this room, to hold it confidential. That is kind of at the heart of coaching, and when you're working with the people assigned to you, confidentiality is key, because coaching and mentoring are based on trust, and we're going to be discussing trust today, and it's pretty hard to build trust and have a trusting relationship if you don't have confidentiality. So I want everybody in this room to feel free to talk about anything that is on your mind related to coaching. And I've discussed with the person that is videotaping that there are many parts during the day when we will not be videotaping at all, because I want you to feel free to say whatever you want to be able to say and not feel constrained by the fact that, oh, this is going to show up on videotape. I'm not sure I want to mention that right now. Okay? If you have questions as I'm going along, please let me know. Practicing new habits of mind is very closely related to the next one, which is challenge the limit of your potential. What do you think that means, challenge the limits of your potential? Kind of an odd statement. It's kind of like saying two different things there. We have a limit to your potential, and I'm asking you to challenge it. Bella.
Well, the word potential is a very bad word.
Okay.
Because it implies limit. It assumes limit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a word that I'd like to use.
Right.
So when I read the thing, I could say, forget about the potential. Just assume that there is no potential, that everybody can do that.
Right. You could, because you're learning some new skills, or what may be new to you, hopefully you will use our time together in a safe environment to practice, to fall flat on your face. It's okay. We're not going to judge you. You're not going to get a grade. We're not going to say, oh, this person's going to make a great coach and this person's not. This is a time for you to really push yourself to learn and practice something that you may not have done before. And I can remember my early coaching days when I would sit, and I do most of my coaching on the telephone with people all over the United States. And I remember my early days of coaching, I would have spread out on my desk all kinds of books and reminders to myself and questions and all that kind of stuff. That's because I wasn't secure in my coaching skills yet. And it's okay when you're starting to have some aids. Maybe you'll want some index cards with a couple points on it that you want to remember. That's okay. It's like, riding a bike. You have, it takes time before you can just sail off and not fall down. Although last year I was down in the Florida Keys, and my husband and I had bikes, and I hadn't ridden a bike probably in 30 years. And that whole story about, oh, you never forget how to ride a bike. Well, apparently my mind said that, but my body disagreed. And I ended up in the middle of a main highway, sprawled across the road. My husband's a block and a half ahead, not even realizing that I had fallen down. So we had the bikes for about 15 minutes, and that was about it for the day. So I didn't do too well with the bike part. I'm going to ask you to monitor your personal technology. So I don't need to go into that. And be responsible for your impact on the room. When one person's talking, we all want to be able to listen to that person. Certainly if you need to leave the room, just leave. Hopefully at a time when it's not going to interfere with some really amazing point that's being made at that part, not by me probably. But we're also going to have some fun. I hate going to workshops where it's all sit and get. And we're going to be doing activities all day because the only way you're going to learn the skills is to use them. Questions about the norms or any other norms you would like to add? Good time? Nope. Okay. Be sure to have fun. Okay. Okay, we're going to, what you're learning today, first of all, I'll tell you that you are obviously a very brilliant group, and that's why you've been chosen for this particular project, because normally what we're going to be doing today takes a 4-day training, and you're going to get it in 1 day. All right, so we'll just call you the advanced group. And so I won't be able to go into as much depth as I normally would in 4 days, but you'll have enough, and I know that you're wise enough and knowledgeable enough that you've had a lot of these skills and can just add them to your toolkit. So we're going to have an understanding of what is a coaching conversation. We're going to look at the connections between coaching and change, because you're going to be working with high needs schools. So if they're high needs, obviously there's going to be a need for change. And there's a lot of work coming out of neuroscience that demonstrates how coaching is really effective in helping that whole process of change. Then we're going to learn, basically we're going to learn 3 essential coaching skills. I have 4, but the 4th one is actually one that consolidates the other 3, so we're not going to spend too much time on the last one. And we're also going to spend some time on the whole issue of trust, because there's some really important research on trust in schools. And as I said a few minutes ago, trust in coaching is really essential. And lastly, you're going to practice the skills. However, the practice is going to be throughout the day. It's not going to be, we're not going to wait till the end of the day to practice. We're going to be practicing throughout. Questions? Any questions about the objectives? Such a quiet group. Are you usually this quiet? No. Okay. I know a couple of you, but no, you're not usually that quiet. All right. Would somebody volunteer to just read this slide? I don't like to have a lot of writing on a slide, but I think it's important to have a little basis for why we're doing coaching.
Can you dim the light?
Dim the light.
That makes it so hard to see.
We'll do it. How about that?
That's good.
That's
You need some lighting in there.
Yes.
That's perfect.
Perfect. Is that better?
That's right.
Okay, so who could read? I know you can all read this, but would somebody volunteer to read this for the group? Go ahead. And would you tell me your name, please?
Mary Beth Kurtz.
Mary Beth? Okay.
Coaching is like strength conditioning for your brain. It helps identify core beliefs and values. It helps school leaders clearly define high expectations. It pushes school leaders to look for win-win solutions. It involves reflections and moves people to solutions based on real understanding of challenges.
Okay. That's a lot of words. What does any of it mean to you? And how is this different from any other conversation you might want to have? Trust is absolutely essential. And you'll see, I'm going to give you one statistic on that when we get to trust, because it's such an important statistic. Coaching is not about just discussing problems. Coaching is moving to solutions. Coaching is an active process. You always want to, in a coaching conversation, the goal is to move to action. So you don't want to, if you go into a school and you're working with these school leaders that you will be working with, I'm sure you could blow the whole day just listening about all the things that are issues or problems in the school and how frustrated or whatever that the school leaders are about that. That's fine as it is. That's not coaching. That's not moving to solutions. That's not getting the person off that point of just focusing on problems. We can have regular conversations that focus on problems, but that doesn't move you to solutions. And the whole goal of coaching is to move to solutions, to move to action. In fact, because we're in an educational world, when I work with my clients, I always work with them to develop what we call homework together for the next time we'll be together. It might be that they're going to be collecting data about their interactions with their staff. It might be someone that really pushes their button, and they're going to kind of take their own pulse at the time that that's going on and figure out what emotion are they going through, and what does that remind them of, that situation that is kind of pushing their buttons. Because they want to get past having people just push their buttons. They want to work with everyone in their buildings. And so that's why we have homework, is so they have let me step back a minute. The very first session or two, we actually spend most of the time just establishing real clear-cut, measurable goals. And then the goal of the coaching is to help that person move toward those goals. Often, and when we get into the skill of listening, that's a major point, is often people just need somebody to listen and as they're talking, because I know for myself, when I start talking out loud about something, I'm thinking at the same time, and that helps me look at possibilities, look at what possible solutions are out there. And we'll talk about aha moments and how just listening to somebody, not ad nauseum, we're not going to go like, you're not going to sit there for hour after hour listening to what's going on, because that gets nowhere. But rather saying, okay, what's the bottom line here? And where do you want it to be? That's one thing. And as you said, sometimes just talking something out will give the person ideas. All right? Oh, I pushed the wrong button. Sorry. Okay, this is my husband with, he's a Greek papu, Greek grandfather, with his first grandchild, 2 hours old. And the purpose for showing this slide is not just to advertise my husband, who is a big gruff man who runs a big labor union in New York City, but rather to demonstrate that not all of your conversations are coaching conversations. In fact, only a very small part of your conversations are coaching conversations. At the same time, you can almost always incorporate coach-like skills into your conversations. For instance, my husband, because he's been president of his union for 36 years, as soon as he sees a problem, he's got to solve it. And I'll say, I had a really difficult day, could I tell you about it? And I'll start talking, and he'll say, well, you should do this, and you should do that. And I said, wait a minute, I just need you to listen. Okay? So, not every conversation is a coaching conversation. And at the same time, when I ask him to listen, I've trained him very well over the past 16 years, that when I say, I just need you to listen, he knows to shut up and listen. Or at least look like he's listening. So, even though we're emphasizing coaching today, please don't think that that's something you have to do 100% of the time you're with the individuals you'll be working with. It's impossible to do that. I mean, I don't coach all day. I'm not coaching right now. Okay? All right. So, coaching is a way of listening and speaking that assumes the belief that others are whole and capable. I put this slide up because the second part of that sentence is extremely important. And what I'd like you to do at your tables right now, so with the other 3 people at your tables, is we're going to have a short discussion. I'll give you, say, 3 minutes. And I'd like you to discuss why it's important to believe that the people you are working with, or will be working with, are whole and capable. Questions before we start? And then I'm going to ask each table to kind of summarize your impressions. Okay? Advisory conversations, social conversations, these are the 3 important components of a coaching conversation. Okay. I love this quote from Susan Scott. It says, while no conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a career, a company, a relationship, or a life, any single conversation can. One of the things people have said to me often is, but doesn't coaching take more time than just giving people the answers? And the answer is, coaching takes time and everything else takes more time. So, what I'd like you to just briefly discuss with the people at your table is a situation where a conversation, either that you led or that you were just involved with, that had a big impact, either on you or the person with whom you were speaking? Just an example on the downside for me, as a new principal in a school, I thought I was being really friendly with some of my staff members, and two of them had on these kind of navy colored dresses with white trim and a bow. I mean, they didn't wear the same thing, but it was kind of similar. I said, oh, they look like beautiful navy dresses. And I remember dressing my child like that. And I never realized till several years later, one of the persons said, you know, we didn't like that comment. Which comment? The one about our dresses. I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, we felt like you were putting us down. I was like, oh my God. You know, and that went on for a couple of years. They held that. So that had a big impact. Not the way I wanted to impact, but that had a big impact. This is the one thing I really wanted to emphasize with you. Rechenschneider did a 10-year study in Chicago, 400 schools, so they had thousands of classrooms, and they followed these schools over 10 years and found out that schools with little or no trust have almost no chance of improving. So if you have armed camps in a school, it's the teachers versus administration, or it's the 9th grade and 10th grade teachers against the 11th and 12th grade teachers, or this department against that department. If there's people that aren't working together because they hold common goals and common values, you have to, if there's no trust, there's probably going to be almost no chance of improving. And this is one very big study that's cited quite frequently. There have been numerous studies on trust, and basically they point to where there's high levels of trust, you have a much higher chance of improving, and where there's little or no trust, almost no chance of improving. Okay. All right, so we're going into the first skill, which I'm going to call the foundational skill, and that's listening. And we all know how to be listeners. You've been really good listeners all morning, and I appreciate that. So we're going to use that first block. So why do we listen? All right, if you read these to yourself. The fourth bullet point, one of the most dramatic situations where I just allowed a person to speak, and I was just an attentive listener. I had a parent come into my building unexpectedly, and this mother was on a tear. I want my child out of that teacher's class, even though the parent really wanted that teacher originally. I want my child immediately changed out of that class, and blah, blah, blah. She went on and on. I listened to her for like 20 minutes. And instead of me saying, okay, well, I know that teacher, and I know she would never do that, or whatever, that would just put the parent on the defensive. I decided to just listen to her. At the end of the 20 minutes, I said to the mom, I said, okay, what would you like to see happen next? Not, what do you want me to do, but what would you like to see happen next? She thought about it. She was thinking about it. She goes, actually, nothing. I do want my son in that class. I was just really upset, and now you listen to me. Nothing more needs to happen. I'm okay now. I'm good. I was like, phew, you know. But at the same time, that taught me, excuse me, at the same time, that taught me an important lesson, that listening is quite frequently a solution. We all like to be listened to. And this parent, if I had tried defending the teacher, if I had tried to tell her she was wrong, basically, and the conversation would have just escalated, as opposed to the mother then saying, no, I don't want anything else to happen. This is fine. I'm okay. She went out. Never saw her again the rest of the year. She was happy. Okay, so the most basic of all human needs is the need to understand and be understood. The best way to understand people is to listen to them. We're not going to be talking about just the words that people say. We're going to be listening to people, to what's beneath the words as well. So we're also going to get into paraphrasing. So we're going to do that, the second block, the second piece of the puzzle, because listening, it says back here, you want to gain clarity. You want to make sure you're on the same page with the person you're listening to. The only way you can do that is essentially to paraphrase. to basically say what you believe the person has put out there. Not in a parrot form, I'm really unhappy today. You're really very unhappy today. We don't want to be parroted. We want to be understood. You say, you're really having a hard day today. Yeah, okay. So paraphrasing sends these three messages. I'm listening, I'm interested, I care, I understand you, or at least I'm trying to understand you. Doesn't mean you agree with the person. You're not offering agreement, you're just listening. I have a little flashlight there, and the cross out sign saying what I hear you saying is if you can avoid saying what I hear you saying is, and I know most of us were taught that, what we're doing with the flashlight is instead of shining it on the person we're listening to, we're now saying, here's what my understanding is. So if you just drop the what I hear, just start with, you're saying blank, blank, blank. Okay? If you say what I hear you saying is no big consequence there, it's just a habit of mine that we've gotten into, and it's just a stronger statement when we say, you're saying blank, blank, blank. And if the person, if you haven't paraphrased them accurately, guess what? You still got a conversation going, because they'll say to you, no, that's not really what I said. That's not really what I meant. Or that's not really how I feel. They'll give you the answer then. So paraphrasing is very powerful, and at the same time, it's almost impossible to do it incorrectly. Even if you don't paraphrase accurately, the person typically will correct you. And you can paraphrase both the content of what the person's saying. Okay, so you have 3 goals. So you're saying you have 3 goals for your school. You want to do this, this, and this by May. Okay, that would be the content. The emotions are what's beneath the content, beneath the words. Okay, so you're pretty anxious about accomplishing your 3 goals because your past experience has shown that it hasn't worked out as you originally planned. And so you're pretty anxious about that, meeting those goals. So that's paraphrasing the emotions that are under it. They may not say their actual emotion, you're just reading underneath. And if they're saying, no, I'm not anxious, I'm frustrated. Because every time I do this, I get told I have to do it a different way. So you may not, again, get the correct emotion. You try for the correct emotion, obviously. However, the person will tell you if you haven't hit the mark. Or they'll say, yep, that's it exactly. I am really anxious. Sometimes people just need to be listened to. That's what the woman said. She needed to be listened to. Even though the guy was being very logical and saying, well, I really think you can. No, I just need you to listen. And what else did he do besides listen? And try to give a solution. He paraphrased, yes. That must really, really hurt. And you can see him struggling. Ugh. And sometimes it is a struggle not to just pop out with the solution. It's just so it's not about the nail. If you want to show it to friends, if you want to show it to your spouse or partner or whatever. Yeah. See, this is what I'm talking about. And as I said, I've trained my husband. When I say I need to be listened to, he will stop. And he at least looks like he's listening. So I don't ask him to paraphrase. I just need him not to be actively giving me solutions when I'm not asking for solutions. I'm going to tell you a quick story that is true from a coaching client that I had a couple of years ago. And it's similar in what you were just saying about, well, maybe if you get up for an hour earlier, it wouldn't be a problem. This assistant principal, and this was in another state in the Midwest, had been told by her principal, Mr., let's just use a name, we'll just say his name was Jack. And he was a bilingual teacher. Jack was always late to school, which of course meant all his colleagues had to cover his classes till he got there. Now, I don't know what the regulations are in this particular state, What I do know is that this assistant principal looked at his file, because the principal said, here's your job. Your job is to get him in here on time. She looked in his file and found 43 letters to his file. 43 letters to his file,
Could write a book.
telling him he had to get to work on time. So that did not accomplish anything, obviously. And she knew giving a 44th letter was not the response that would get the action. So I said, so what are you going to do about this? She said, well, I'm trying to think it through. And I said, well, what does this teacher do well? And she said, well, when he is in school, he is a phenomenal bilingual teacher. I said, so how are you going to use that information to get him to come to school on time? She said, I'm going to work it out. She came back to the coaching like about 2 weeks later. I said, what happened with Jack? She said, I decided I was going to have a coaching conversation with him. So in other words, she was being very intentional. She did some pre-planning. She decided, okay, here's how I'm going to approach him. She went into his classroom. She didn't have him come to her office. She went into his classroom and said, Jack, when you are here, you do phenomenal things with your bilingual students. And they need you here every minute of the day because they deserve to have what you can give them. I said, so what happened next? She said, he broke down in tears. I said, why did he break down? She said, because he said, nobody has ever told me I do a good job. They only tell me that I come in late. They only pick on me being late. So she said, so I said, so what happened next? And she goes, well, I said to him, so what are you planning to do so that you'll be on time every day and your students will get the best teacher they have in you? And so then he started to bargain. He said, well, first of all, he gave all the excuses. Well, traffic's always bad, and I have all these things I have to have happen in the morning, and I just broke up with my partner, and this, that, and the other thing. All kinds of excuses why he couldn't get there on time. And then he thought about it, and he goes, well, I could do some of those things at nighttime, and then I could leave earlier in the morning. So, okay. And your students need you every day. He said, well, what if I promise to be here 4 out of 5 days? And I said, so what did you do when he came up with this proposition? She said, I just was silent and waited for her to think about it. And then he said, well, actually I need to be here every day. And I said, so what's been the result now? She says, he's been here on time every day since we had the conversation. A couple months later, at the end of the school year, I said, so whatever happened with Jack? She said, he's been here every day on time. That was a situation where she had him come up with a solution. She asked him questions. She told him things that he had not been told before that were in a positive vein. And she wasn't being facetious or anything about it. She was being very genuine. So what can you genuinely say to him that's positive? And that was enough to break through his kind of insurmountable problem of coming late to school every day. He now was motivated to come to school. He knew he had a champion in school, and his relationships with all the other staff changed. He had been on a number of school committees because he had been there a number of years. And he was always the person who, if you said it's sunny out today, he'd say, no, it's raining. He's the one always with the opposition. She said, at meetings, first of all, the other teachers started being more positive toward him because they were no longer carrying the load of covering his class. And secondly, his attitude changed. Not only did he agree with his colleagues more at meetings, he actually was very creative and could expand upon ideas. So he became a very contributing person. And so, John, if I could borrow that back a minute. In this book, actually, I have that story on the flyleaf of the book because that's how much it impressed me with how much he changed through her coaching conversation. Does that happen all the time? Absolutely not. For him, that was a critical moment. And one more letter to his file obviously was not the answer. So that was the situation where he had a nail in his head, and by just switching the conversation up to focus on why his students needed him there on time changed his whole attitude about it and changed his behavior about it. We're going to get into the second set of skills. We've looked at committed listening, we've looked at paraphrasing. We're going to get down to powerful questions and positive intent. When I talk about positive intent, it's what I was talking about in that story about the teacher that came to school late. The assistant principal started the conversation by saying, since you want your students to learn and you're so good at teaching them, what are you going to do about this problem? What are you going to do about this issue? What's going to get you here on time? So she used a positive to then introduce, and again, I'm not asking you to sugarcoat things, and we'll talk about expectations as well. So using a positive to introduce some powerful questions. Why do we ask questions? Gain clarity, to support possibilities, create awareness of something, get the person to think. Reflection precedes insight. If you look at, and you have this again in your packet, people have to think. We don't do a lot of thinking in our society. We do a lot of reacting. We don't take time to actually consider things. It's like, oh, this is the next issue, I'm just going to do this. We don't actually think it through most of the time. We just go from situation to situation and quick make decisions and quick engage in something. If you have time to really reflect, there's a good chance you're going to have a really big insight. Oh, now that I've been thinking about that, and this is your role as a coach, bring out that thinking. They reflect. Ah, what did you learn from that? Ah, I'm having this big aha. I have actually seen that I've been asking my third grade teen to follow these rubrics that Danielson has out there. And now I realize when I think it through, that's the group that only had about 2 hours of training on the rubrics. And I'll bet they don't really understand them. And that's why they're not following them. They haven't had a chance to try them out and learn about them. Okay, so you have an insight. That gives you energy then. And then energy takes you to action. And that's the goal of coaching, is to move to action. Questions? Comments? I'm moving on. Okay, so let's look at some positive versus negative questions. I want you to look at the questions, think of how you could rephrase it from being a kind of a negative question to a positive question. Change it from being a closed question and an open-ended question. Closed, I'm just going to assume you know what open-ended and closed means, but and if you don't, closed is where you can just give a one-word answer like yes or no, maybe. Where open-ended is kind of a starter point. Do you have any objectives for transforming your school? Okay, so you're going to walk in, you're going to talk to the principal, and you're going to say, do you have any objectives for transforming your school?
No, okay.
Ooh. Okay, what kind of response do you think you're going to get to that? Well, you're going to get a yes or no. No, I never thought about having any objectives for transforming my school. Or, of course I do. What kind of feeling do you think is going to be beneath the response to that kind of question being put to a person?
Inquisition. Kind of like a put down.
It is.
Well, it's challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says like I don't really trust you to have created anything. I wouldn't ask this question if I already knew that you had great objectives for your school. So you mustn't have very good objectives for your school.
It basically puts the person on the defensive.
Yeah.
Question.
Absolutely, puts people on the defensive. So what would be a more open-ended way of asking them? To get the information, you need to work with them about what they're trying to do with their school.
Could you share the objectives you have? Or what have you planned?
Okay, what is almost always a good place to go to ask an open-ended question? So, what have you planned for transforming your school? I just have this one. What objectives have you planned for your school? Very simple. So now it's an open-ended question. There's no negativity, no positive. I mean, it's like, well, it's positive. It says, what objectives have you planned? So the positive part is you are assuming they have planned. So there is a positive side, and there's no negative side to that. Let's look at this question. you have any strategies for working with your staff? Really hadn't thought about it. What's another way you could word that one?
What strategies seem to be working well with your staff?
What strategies have been working well with your staff? I think that's almost what I have here. What strategies are having the best results for you? Have you thought about doing, and then you mentioned something, have you thought about having all of your teachers in PLCs?
Sure, I thought about it.
That's actually a bit of advice in disguise. Have you thought about having PLCs? Because now you're telling them, here's what you should be doing. Okay? You see where that's where you're slipping in what you would impose or what you would try? As opposed to, so what other options are you considering? Or what options are you considering? Have you thought of any strategies for working with resistant staff? Now I just close them off in a locked room, and I only have staff meetings with everybody else. What's another way to change that up? I mean, that might be what they're thinking, I'd love to be able to do that, but in the other hand, that might not work so well. So have you thought of any strategies for working with resistant staff? Another way to phrase that. That would be an open-ended question. I know, let your brilliance out, come on, you have it. You know what to say.
Well, first I want to ask, do you have a problem with it? No, you don't want to do that.
Why are your staff resistant? No?
Excuse me?
Why are your staff resistant? Why is there some of your staff?
Okay. I'm going to just offer a caution. Sometimes you can use a why question. Sometimes why sounds like a judgment. Sometimes it depends on the relationship you have with the person.
What causes resistance with your staff?
Could be what are some of the
Barriers?
what are some of the
What are some
barriers
of the
that are
barriers?
causing resistance? Yeah, that's much more open-ended. Why might be, again, something that puts somebody on the defensive. Again, that can really depend on the relationship.
You could use it.
So that if you know a person well enough and you have a good relationship with that person, asking a why question there is not going to be a problem because they won't take it as a judgment. People that you do not know very well may take that as a judgment if you ask a why question.
So you start with a what question? Start the question
Yeah,
with a what?
as a school leader who always puts their students and staff first, what strategies are you considering to ensure their success? I mean, that's a long way to put it, but, and at the same time, all of these have a positive side to them, the second version. And what else are you noticing about the first versus the second version of the questions?
Second versions are
Okay, I have just put it in all the second versions as what questions, just to model, again, that what is usually a pretty safe way to ask an open-ended question, and you can almost always turn a question into a what question. So it says, do you have the time? Yeah, I do. I mean, I had a teacher once, if you asked, do you have the time? They'd say, yeah. And then we learned quickly to say, well, what time is it? So you can change everything pretty much around with a what question, and it'll become open-ended, as opposed to a yes or no question. And this is something really helpful to model for the people you work with, too, because I'm sure most of us ask lots of closed questions. I do want to emphasize this because I know this is going to be an issue you will be dealing with, and that one of the most important responsibilities of the coach leader is to hold up standards and expectations. So, again, you may get objections from principals or other people you're working with that, well, I really don't see too much positive I could say to this particular teacher. well, maybe at this particular moment they can't think of something positive, they can make sure that the person is clear about the expectations. So they might say, Mrs. Bracken, since you hold very high academic expectations for your students, what are you doing to make sure that they are meeting the core content standard, whatever, in that area? And how do you know when your students have achieved that? So that is a really important thing to understand, is that in coaching, you're not giving up standards. You're not giving up expectations and just saying, well, they're at a low level, so you meet them at the low level, okay. And you move up to what are the full standards and expectations for their school, for their district, for the state, for the feds. You're not agreeing with the people you coach that they should be on a low level, and here's all the reasons why we're on a low level. Yeah, these things exist. These are the realities of the job and the situation, and you still have to meet these standards and expectations. And that's what they should be emphasizing with their staff, is, yeah, we can go on and complain how we don't have as many dollars, we don't have the resources, and we still have to meet the expectations. My last school where I was principal had over 50% of the children came from homes where English was not the primary language. The school district redistricted, and we got even more students that came from transient homes and families that had English as a second language, if at all. And the staff by that time were so on board together, they didn't say, boy, we've gotten a bad break here in this redistricting. This isn't fair that we got all the needy kids in the district and the other schools got the good kids. No, they said, we have one in-service day left this year. And I said, well, how would you like to spend it? And they as a group said, we want to know how to better meet the needs of the children and the parents coming into our school. So we spent the day with a bunch of parents who were from the community, telling us what they needed from the school, what would work for them in communicating with them, what their goals were for their children. That's how the staff spent the day. They didn't spend the day whining about why we didn't have the resources and why our basic skills teachers were taken out and we no longer had as many basic skills teachers. They said, okay, here's what we've been dealt. We still have to meet the standards and expectations. How are we going to do that? Okay, and so here's a couple of examples of statements that hold up expectations. And my goal here is not that we discuss all the standards and expectations, but my goal is that for you to understand that when you go in and work in these difficult, challenged schools, they have a responsibility to implement standards and to have high expectations, no matter what the resources are, no matter what the variables are. And for some, it's a harder climb than others.